Hi, Sebastian. It's great to have you here. I'm very excited about our conversation today.
Thanks.
Before we jump into the questions, and I have some very interesting questions for you.
Looking forward.
Do you mind sharing something about you, yourself, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Sebastian, the founder of Flea. We started our business. What is it? Almost 1.5 years ago. And yeah, we're building a developer experience platform. So what that is, we help CTOs identify the friction points in their developers' daily work, and thus help them, to enable their teams to ship better software faster and happier. And my background, surprisingly, is not in tech, but in business. I started working on the project, more coming from the people side, but then to iterations, we shifted into the developer focus. But I think there's some questions coming up in that area as well. But yeah, that's sort of a little bit about what we do and where I come from.
Well, thanks so much. That's very interesting. And you mentioned that you have this business background, and I see you have a lot of kind of entrepreneurial experience, both from
Right.
being a founder and consultant. Like, tell us about that. How did you ended up
Right.
with being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I was coming from a quite entrepreneurial family as well, and then so my goal has always been to become an entrepreneur. Really, I wasn't really sure about being an entrepreneur in tech when I was younger, but that's the way I think where it is today. And then yeah, after university, I started working, or I actually studied a dual program where I was working for a bank. So in a very corporate job, and I very, very quickly realized that this is not the right setting for me because I'm just too free-minded and creative and wanted to achieve more faster, and it was just the wrong environment for myself. And then started a master's program in innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. We went to the Silicon Valley, so that further increased the fondness of working in a startup and becoming an entrepreneur maybe one day myself. And then I joined a startup a fintech startup in Germany. They're called Finanzguru, which is a multi-banking app. And there I was able to bring my finance background together with the entrepreneurial ambition for the first time. Was sort of an entrepreneur in residence there, kind of the assistant to the two founders. And from there on, really fell in love with the startup scene even more, and becoming an entrepreneur. Then learned how to build startups in a company builder here in Berlin. So where we helped a couple of corporates build startups themselves, or at least innovation projects. Then I joined one of those companies, was the head of venture development there, and responsible for building new products, features, ideating with customers. And that was quite exciting. So the next step to becoming a founder, and then realized some issues that in that company when it comes to people leadership. And I thought, okay, hey, this is actually a topic that's close to my heart, and now I feel ready to jumpstart the entrepreneurial career, and that's how it went. And now we're here sitting together talking about how far we've come. Yeah, so it's actually quite a nice path.
So, like, tell me, you said about people development and how people operate in organizations, and
Right.
your product is about building better teams and better experience. Like, tell us,
Yeah.
like, what is it about? Like, what does Flea does?
Yeah. So as I quickly mentioned, it's a developer experience platform that probably
What is
gives an
it?
idea, but nobody knows. I mean, even in my sales calls, it's still a pretty new topic for CTOs as well. But if you want to look at it from a very um, historic point of view, or so in the end, what we do is we help software engineers become more productive. And the traditional way to improve developer productivity, or to measure it in the first place, you only can improve things that you can actually measure. So how do you measure developer productivity or developer satisfaction? And the traditional ways to do this have been really heavily focused on understanding metrics, right? And I always like to think of an example, or to give a more a plastic example is thinking about a writer, so like Shakespeare or Goethe, right? So the traditional way of measuring developer productivity was to count the lines of code that the developer would write, or the number of changes they did to their code, right? So, but imagine Shakespeare being evaluated not on the output that he created, or the value that it brought, the joy that it brought to people, but rather the lines that he wrote, the verses that he wrote, how oftentimes he changed them. It doesn't really tell you a lot about productivity, right? So the next step then was to look at science and what does science say, how you can improve developer productivity, and then you get to DORA metrics. I think this is for now, or similar to the SPACE framework. It's another framework that is science backed. You're looking now at a bit more of a flow or process topics, stuff like throughput and code quality have become more important. But again, sort of measuring metrics, only gives you information that is lagging, because you can only count the metrics, right? Once code has been written and stuff has been done. And also it gives you only a limited visibility into the actual coding work that is done by developers. But where we come from and what we believe in this is that developer productivity is actually much more impacted by the things that also happen outside of the actual developer work, right? So software engineering is not a new topic. So how to code, how to do code reviews, that has been done over and over again, and people are quite smooth in it. But where real friction occurs is oftentimes in the surrounding factors, right? So if you think about having unclear goals, or whether when the requirements that come from product are not clear, there's no user feedback, developers don't really know, hey, how are our users actually engaging in our product, right? Not having all of these information, or having unclear information about that, is actually blocking a developer much more, because he needs to think, okay, so if the requirements are, let's say that there's spots in the requirements, right? They need to go back to product, or they need to think about it themselves. So then they build it. Then they build the wrong thing. They have to restart again with all of that stuff, right? And so what we believe in is that, simply put, developers know best what is actually blocking them from doing their best work. And this is what we try to uncover. And to do so, we use developer feedback. So we directly ask developers about a variety of topics that we also derived from science, and looked at what are the most common factors that prevent developers from doing their best work, or that impact developer productivity. And then we proactively ask them, hey, is any of these things really blocking you? And that nudging process also helps them to really think about their whole environment and come up with the things that really block them. And maybe to give some concrete examples. So the biggest developer productivity blockers, according to science, are job enthusiasm. So if you just, on a general level, you just don't feel as enthusiastic about your work as you could be, and then obviously that has different root causes, but that is sort of this biggest signal. Career development, it has the strongest impact on retention, for example. So if I'm unhappy with that, that's a big topic. Then how is the team working? How fast do we resolve conflicts? Those are big topics. And then on a process level, as I mentioned, maybe it's unclarity about goals, about timelines, roadmaps, having unclear requirements. When the code review process is having hiccups, those are big issues. And then obviously if they have the wrong tooling and stuff like that. And I think those examples already give you an idea. Looking at the developer environment, or the developer experience as a whole, gives much more visibility and options to actually improve a developer's daily work. And now, to close the round, if you look back at Shakespeare or Goethe, so it's tough to measure them according to how much they write, how much they change their writing, but giving them the setting where they can fully work in a deep work mode, maybe with the right pen and paper back in the days, or with proper lighting, those are all scenarios where you can make sure that at least they have the right setting to be their best. And this is what we focus on.
Well, that's great. So do I hear you right? So basically, you're not so much as measuring their productivity, but you are measuring the environment they're in, and if the organization can improve those factors that influence their productivity and satisfaction, it means they'll be better in what they do. Is that
Exactly.
so?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious. Let's say
Yeah.
you have two developers and you have improved all the factors in terms of goals and communication, understanding the stakeholders. Is there a way to understand who is performing better and to measure their productivity
Yeah.
on that level?
So this is exactly what we want to avoid. So nice that you bring it up, because that's where metrics are for, right? And you can measure individual productivity. But how would you feel as a developer, as any other employee, if your boss suddenly starts to measure you according to your individual performance? I mean, in terms of a performance review cycle, this is what you want, right? And you want to receive feedback. But again, the um, that there are some metrics maybe where you can judge a person on their individual productivity or performance correctly, but most oftenly, I mean, as we just discussed in the examples, right? Just the lines of code, it's a super toxic measure to measure performance. But measuring sort of outcome or output, no, outcome based measures is much more important, and then looking back at to yeah, how did an individual person contribute to that outcome, maybe is the better approach. And then again, we believe that coming from a bottom up approach, and this is actually what our early customers really say, that, hey, since we implemented Flea, we have created a much more open and strong team culture, people speaking up more, feeling more engaged, feeling more responsible for their work because they're suddenly part of improving their day, their work environment, their job, and not being sort of monitored from top down and feeling, you know, that they have to defend themselves. And I mean, once you're attacked or measured by metrics, right? What happens? You get frustrated. You take a step back. You don't feel inclined to push your fullest. You don't want to contribute as much. You don't feel like it's, hey, it's our baby, it's my project. But you actually create that that front between sort of the company on the one side, on the higher side, and the developer working for the company. And especially in tech, this is such a prone thing to happen because everybody is just complaining about how engineering is too slow, how delivery is too slow, how the roadmap is too long, and nothing gets done. And that is just, and measuring individual performance is just another factor to create a toxic culture.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I do remember, like, in my organizations I've been working
uh,
for, saying, "Hey, our developers are not working. They're not fast enough. They're not good enough." But it happens that they don't have enough information, and by measuring how clear the goals are, how communications is
exactly.
flowing,
And you
that
understand.
things that organization need to improve in order for them to develop
True.
products.
I mean, sadly, developers are just in the. If you look at a conveyor belt, right? The developers are sort of at the end of the game, so that's where all the blame in the end pops up, right? But oftentimes the problems, yeah, they start much earlier with unclear goals, unclear requirements, a lack of user feedback, developing the wrong thing in the first place. Um,
Yeah, great. Do you want to, like, share some stories from your customers about how, what, like you said, the culture is changing, and what effect did it have on the organization?
Yeah, I mean it's super fun reading all the feedback that we get from the developers in the surveys. Of course, we're super stoked at the beginning when we started building the product, and people actually used the product as intended. I mean, till this day, we have over 90% fill out rates on our surveys because developers say, hey, it's finally a survey that actually speaks to me, that touches all the important parts of my work, unlike, you know, the regular HR surveys that get, I don't know, like 30% fill out rates. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we read in there. I mean, from people becoming parents, struggling with shifting kindergarten work and work. So it's super incredible that even such personal topics pop up. I remember one employee saying, "Hey, the air quality in the office is too bad, and that's preventing me from doing my best work. So I don't know, just put an air purifier next to the guy for $100, and he's more happy and whatever." So it's like those simple things, but then oftentimes it's also bigger things like psychological safety. Um, that we see that are blocking people. I remember one guy recently said that he feels like he lacks knowledge of the system and thus is preventing himself from actively taking part in team discussions. So huge blocker for his individual productivity maybe in the end, but also for the team, right? You hire the smartest people you can get to work together, and then somebody saying, hey, I feel like I don't want to contribute because I have this feeling that I don't know enough. And I mean, without our survey, that wouldn't have been popped up, right? And the person would have stood on the sideline. But apparently, we have designed our surveys in such a nice way that the person felt, I mean, was nudged and felt safe enough to share that. And now the CTO in that case was able to ask, hey, okay, so where do you actually feel that you miss knowledge, and how can we help you to get that knowledge fast so that you can contribute, right? So that's on an individual level, and then for on a team level, I think in the last survey that the last conversation that I had with one of our customers about their recent survey, they identified two or three key issues. One was that within their the new set of features that they had rolled out, they were missing documentation, and that documentation actually led to a loss of velocity or speed in code reviews, because the testers um, didn't really know how the feature was supposed to work. So they couldn't evaluate whether it actually worked. So then they had to go back to the developers and the PMs who built the feature, creating a lot of overhead and just slowing the whole process down big time. Another topic was related to tech debt. So they had amassed a substantial amount of tech debt, and didn't really know how to tackle it or where the biggest problems were. And so they now found a way to spot where the most urgent part of the tech debt was. They created a process now to better track tech debt on a continuous level, and they're now including it into their regular OKRs to ensure the tech debt stays at a certain rate. And so it's stuff like that. What was the third point they had? I don't know. But I mean, that those are sort of no, another one was, no, I remember. So career development was a
Oh,
big one. And that was actually also a fun conversation with the CTO there. So first he said, "Hey, I actually also wanted to implement a career framework so that I can better put developers into place and have a proper framework in place." But he was a bit anxious because he thought the team wouldn't like being clustered more strongly into a framework. But then actually the feedback from our survey was that roughly a third of the engineers were unhappy with not having clear career framework, and they didn't know what they needed in order to achieve the next level, right? So he said, "Hey, amazing feedback for me. Now I can actually do what I had intended, and I'm sure that the team will perceive it in a positive way, because I have now black and white the data and don't have to trust my gut feeling or anything." And then similarly, that company switched to being remote, and so I think it's now 1.5 years ago that they made the switch. And now people are starting to say, "Hey, we're feeling a bit disconnected, and that is actually affecting us." And so now they're actively ideating ways on how to get people more engaging despite being remote.
you mentioned two frameworks, Dora and Space. Is it
Yeah.
something you're using in your assessment? Tell us,
Um,
like, what is it?
So right now we don't use any external frameworks. So Space, for example, is a just a very high level framework that actually doesn't give you specific metrics to track. They just tell you, hey, you should track satisfaction of your developers. That's where the S comes from. A is the activity of your developers, for example. So they just give you sort of rough ideas on what you should track, but then the right metrics to track in the end, there's no real guidance on that besides maybe Dora, and that is actually where the problem comes from and why. Or I mean, there's a big problem in tech that you cannot measure developer productivity proper. That there's no trusted approach to do so. Dora maybe is the best or the thing that comes closest, but in the end, it's four metrics. Again, measuring throughput, like the deployment frequency. So how often does the team actually deploy a new code, and then on a quality basis, maybe the lead time, how how fast do they go from a commit that they make a code commit to pushing it into production. So it's giving you information on speed, velocity, and maybe the quality, uptime, and stuff like this. But it doesn't really give you information on a more holistic level. So let's say if our lead time now goes up or down, I don't know why that happened, right? So I don't know where to sort of what to tackle in the tech org to actually improve those metrics. And this is why, where we come in with a more qualitative approach, because that actually gives you the context on, why things might be good, or might not be good, and that actually allows a CTO or an engineering leader to tackle that point specifically. Maybe you could say actually that we have our own framework. It's derived on 46 productivity factors, as mentioned earlier, that we derived from all the studies that are out there. And yeah, 46 might sound like a lot, but we've created a really lightweight survey design where the engineers just really have to tick boxes on whether that specific impact factor is affecting them. And then in a second step, for only the factors that they seem are important for them or are not going as well in the company, we ask them for qualitative feedback. And that way we get both a holistic view very quickly on a quantitative level, so we can tell you based on scores which blockers are most prominent in your company. And then for those blockers, you would get qualitative feedback from your team on why those are actually, why they are impactful right now, what specifically is blocking them. Oftentimes, developers already suggest solutions on how you can solve them. And then in our tool, we also give them recommendations. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, finishing
Okay.
the sentence. So we have our own framework in the end. We don't have a fancy name for it yet, and it will probably, we're still adapting it, but this is what it looks like. Yeah.
From what you're saying, I hear a lot about communication. Again, understanding goals, communicating like the
Yeah.
specifications for the feature. It looks like, feels like when you have a smaller team, it's easier to communicate and there are less
Yeah.
friction in terms of understanding what to do and how to do that. Whereas in the large organizations, you might have more problems. Like, do you see that? What's the difference? Do you see, if you see any difference between small teams, small organizations, and big organizations?
I mean, what we see is, I mean, the organizational structure obviously affecting our results. So if we have a small team with six engineers, so they're all working together as one product team, so they have the same problems, right? But then if you look at bigger organizations where they have dedicated front and back end DevOps teams, so you have various problems in those teams, but then you also have common issues or common, what is the English word now? Commonalities across the whole organization. And this is what we see there. We, again, maybe so you have differences from that point of view, but then if you look at it on a way how it is handled, so for a bigger organization like the engineering manager or a director who is overseeing two teams, let's say, so he is discussing with these two teams which specific problems they have and how to solve them. And then the CTO might only look at sort of the high level stuff that is affecting the whole organization. And in a smaller organization, the CTO is having his one or two teams. So he's looking at do the same stuff that in the bigger corporation, maybe the engineering manager or director would look into. Actually, besides the organizational structure, we do, as of now, not really see any bigger differences in sort of the issues that pop up.
And like you mentioned, there are different types of org structure. There are like product teams and there are like front end, back end teams. Can you see which structure is better for an
Uh,
engineering organization? Do you have
that, that,
anything?
that, I mean, we don't have hundreds of customers yet to make a valid or to make a resume. But then, I mean, we already see that some companies that have a squad system in our user base are not using the regular structures, but we don't actually have, so I don't have any strong data on saying, hey, we have a belief that this team works better than this. What we see is though that there's different cultures in different teams. So on the teams where the CTO is much, much more involved or is having a strong sense for developer experience, for communication, for people leadership. There we see that the feedback that the teams share is much stronger, is more open. People share more personal stuff. So there we can see that the eagerness of the CTO really plays a role in how successful our product is, but also in general how the communication in a company works.
If you were to say, I don't know, 3 to 5 factors of a great developers team, engineering team, what would they be?
What would be the best factors? I mean, Obviously, open communication. I mean, this is why I started the company. What I learned from my own personal experience, and I think open communication. I mean, it like in every good relationship can solve everything, right? So because that helps you to first surface, then discuss and resolve the issues. So that would be number one. Number two is obviously having an value driven or an outcome based approach. So not focusing on just doing the output or doing things, but actually focusing, hey, are we actually doing the right thing? Or are we building the right thing? Which impact is having, or is feature A having over feature B? And why should we decide this? Because this also creates much more alignment within the tech team, right? Developers are very prone to develop stuff that isn't used in the end, right? And so they have a lot of resentment when they're not feeling convinced that the features actually will actually be being used or be valuable. So that would be something. And then obviously the in companies or in the companies that use our tool, where the CTO is in charge of both product and tech, and we see that those teams tend to perform better, or at least the processes and the communication there is better, because otherwise you have that silo, right? Tech is always fighting against product is fighting against tech, and the moment you have aligned leadership on both, you have somebody who can mitigate there and who ensures that the processes there are well interconnected, and that is also a huge success factor.
Hmm.
So I think those would be the top three out of my head.
Well, that's, I mean, I do agree communication is obviously number one, unless you start talking to each other and telling okay, what you want and like giving feedback that is developmental feedback that helps
Yeah,
people grow
exactly.
and helps organization grow. I mean, developers give feedback to organizations by filling in this survey. So
Yeah,
unless you have that, no one is possible.
exactly. And I mean, it's yeah, you create that the moment you invite people to not only communicate or share feedback, but with their, I mean, the incentive system suddenly is aligned in developer experience compared to traditional metrics when it comes to the CTO, engineering managers, and devs, right? Everybody. So the CTO might want faster delivery, so but he can achieve it by unblocking his teams, right? The teams, they want to have a nice working environment, so they are incentivized to share what is blocking them quite naturally, right? And I think this is also something very unique and that we experience that isn't there otherwise.
You mentioned there were tensions. There could be tensions between various
Yeah.
departments in organization, and if they are working together, it's easy for them to collaborate. But obviously, like engineering units, they communicate with products, finance, sales, with every other else, with every other team in the organization. How do you see this should be like, I don't know, how is your product maybe helping in this cross-functional collaboration? I don't know how what do you see organizations need to do in order to like create this collaborations cross departments?
Tough. I mean, that's more of an organizational, psychological question, maybe. But I mean, coming back to or connecting that to our topic, I think what definitely helps is alignment and clarity of goals, milestones, roadmaps. And I mean, that starts with the CEO understanding, hey, what is the strategy that we want to pursue? Then product, understanding, okay, how can we from a feature, from a product perspective, best support that strategy, what within each feature is actually helping us achieve that strategy, be it financially, be it retention based, and then having a clear understanding and evaluation system that they can then use to ideate new features, talk with the devs, and as I just mentioned, for them it's super important to have clarity on are we actually developing the right thing to achieve our goals. I mean, there's nothing more distracting or annoying than shifting priorities, building a feature that in the end isn't even shipped or isn't even pushed live. So creating alignment between the company goals, the company strategy, and how that drills down into the specific features and also the success metrics of those features. So for example, maybe another example that was quite crazy to read. Within one company, having unreliable success metrics and user feedback was one of the biggest issues. And one developer even said that they had been in his team working on one feature for 3 to 9, no, was it for 6 to 9 months, only to realize after it's been shipped that it was only built or only ideated around one specific customer. And so the whole feature wasn't applicable to all the other customers. So they basically just developed something for like an individual feature in over 6 to 9 months, right? So not only the frustration for the individual developer, but also the costs for the company. And I think this perfectly shows how impactful having aligned goals and then success metrics can be.
I mean, it's kind of basic to have aligned goals, and I'm
Yeah,
curious
but
why.
everything is basic. Also, collecting feedback from your team sounds super basic, and why would I need a tool for this? But the reality is, in daily work, it's super tough to ensure that it actually happens. Yeah, and to stay true to your goals, to have proper requirements, to actually understand what are the success metrics of each specific feature product. Yeah, you'd be surprised about the reality in the trenches.
I'm not surprised at all. I see that, yeah. But it's great that you have kind of a framework. I mean, it's always easy when you have a framework, when you have certain
Yep.
steps you need to take, because, like, we all know communication, collaboration, feedback, goal setting, but it's just so huge and big. But if you have a framework, like 46 aspects that you measure, that's
Yep.
much easier to execute and then act upon the results of the survey.
Yeah.
So what's the plans? What are the plans for Flea? Yeah, what's
Future.
your ambition?
Yeah. I mean, what we are really good in right now is surfacing the friction points in tech teams. And that is where our customers currently get the most benefit and that they appreciate. But then surfacing is only maybe a quarter of the real success, right? You can only improve once you put stuff into action, once you implement solutions, and this is where we want to focus on next. And our approach there is to support or to intertwine with existing meeting rituals that happen already in tech teams, right? So maybe, for example, on a more individual level, as I mentioned earlier, the topic that popped up with I don't know. Combining a private life, the kindergarten situation with work, or the one developer saying that he lacks knowledge of the system and thus is hesitant to share. I, Individual issues that will pop up like this, we want to push them into the next one-on-one meeting that the respective developer is having with his CTO or engineering manager, so that they can discuss it there. And for more holistic problems like the tech debt or the documentation issue, the plan is to either, with generative AI, create an agenda for a team retro that the team that is affected by that issue can talk about it, to prepare Q&A sessions for the CTO about the career paths, to already based on the information that we have on the specific company, already suggest a career framework and put the employees into place. Then again, push that into a red road to discuss overall, push it into a one-on-one meeting to discuss with the individual developer whether they see themselves being put in the right place and what are their career goals actually and how they affect them. So yeah, making the whole process or closing the loop from identifying, analyzing, taking action, and then monitoring whether improvements have actually had the success that was wished for. And so far, we already supporting the one-on-one workflow. So we have an included one-on-one tool in our product that is being used really nicely. And then the next steps will be to think about the right methods to tackle the team issues. And then after that, the next step is to also improve the recommendations that we give. So we already do so in a beta, but then the real goal for us is to have a proper maturity framework where we can say, hey, the level how you measure success metrics at the current state is maybe a 4 out of 10. So in order to get to a 5 or to a 6 out of 10, these are the next best steps that similar companies to you, or that the current best practice is on measuring success metrics. And that way we can help a company then on a continuous level within their existing mode of work, so without super much additional workload, to sort of level them up and become an ever better organization. So this is kind of what we have in mind for now.
Well, that sounds amazing. I mean, you're building the infrastructure for creating great cultures, assessment, action steps on individual, team, and organizational level. Good
Exactly.
luck
Yeah.
with that. I mean,
Thanks. It's a lot of work. It will be a lot of work.
a lot of work. Yeah, but it's
It's so much
great.
fun. I
Yeah.
mean, I recently said to a friend, being an entrepreneur or building a business is 10 times harder than I ever thought it would be. But then when we read the feedback from the team and they actually openly share how they feel about their work, what is blocking them, what is, but also contrary, what is already working really well, and just seeing how our product is being used and how much it helps. That's just, it just feels so amazing.
Yeah.
So it's well worth it and makes us excited for what's to come.
Cool. So, from what I see, the workplace is changing a lot. It's like movement, offline, remote, back to offline, hybrid, diverse teams. I mean, economy influences the way we work together.
Yeah.
What would you advise? What would your advice be to organizations? How they need to change to be ready to for the future of work?
Yeah, I think two things here I would say is A, moving from top down monitoring, obviously, to more of an inclusive bottom up approach, taking, yeah, as I said earlier, right? I think for me, it is really startling that I hire people, pay them a lot of money, and then I just tell them top down, hey, do stuff like this and this. This is how or how I measure your performance, but instead, and not using the holistic power of that team, make them feel valued, included, have them be part of the solution discussion, and just really create that, yeah, that teamwork that every company needs to be successful, right? So just making sure that that you are a team, that the team is part of the solution. So I think this is a key because we're still in an employee market, I would say, and I think it's not changing anytime soon. And we definitely see that the smartest minds leaving companies where they're not heard, where where they're just used as a number and not as a for the intellectual curiosity or power that they have. So that would be number one, and maybe also connected to that, something that I read recently in an HR newsletter is that companies need to shift from sort of a superficial interest in their employees. So if you look at current engagement surveys, they're super high level. Nothing really happens afterwards. It's just sort of a vanity thing. So that management can say, "Hey, and we have a survey. We listen to you," but in the end, it just creates much more frustration. And so I think and that was also the resume in that newsletter. Companies or HR teams need to start honestly or seriously figuring out what their developers or what their teams in general really need in order to do their best work. And I mean, it sounds weird to say that this is something where the industry needs to change to, because it's like the most obvious thing. I want people that I pay money to do their best work for me. So why the hell do I not focus on making it as easy for them as possible to do so? Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
we'll see a change there.
Well, yeah.
I
Let's
hope it
hope
will
for
be
that. You work towards that goal. I work towards that goal. Like
perfect.
we can do that.
It can only be better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. It's a really interesting conversation. I was
Yeah,
really
thank
like
you too.
interested to learn about the tool and how you see the future of the work, like of work, and what it's like. How's it different for developers, and that they need kind of different types of different types of surveys to be able to perform better.
100%. And I mean, there's such a misconception, right? Everybody says developers are so silent, they're remote, they're always at home, they don't want to communicate. But in the end, you just need to nudge them in the right way and ask them. And they are the most amazing people to work with because they have that, they have this urge for doing the right thing, for figuring out the truth. And they just really then just not heard and they're not asked. And it's just such a waste of potential, both for a company but also for the individuals. Yeah. Anyhow,
Sure.
I'm probably away.
How people can find out more about you, about Flea, yeah, where they can find information about you.
Yeah. So I mean, they can check me out on LinkedIn. Just search for Sebastian Gerhardt and Flea, and that is FLEA, or on our website, obviously, Hello Flea.
Yeah. Well, there will be a link to your website and your LinkedIn profile down in the bottom of this video.
And super happy to chat. We give out free trials. So There's no strings attached opportunity to just try and see whether it works for your team or not.
Oh, cool. They just write you on LinkedIn or through the website, or how
Hit
they
me
can do
up,
that?
hit me up, and I'll set it up. Oh, yeah, this has been
Okay.
really fun.